The Replies AI Podcast, your trusted take on the latest AI news. Episode 4, OpenAI versus Claude AI, the AI power shift.
Welcome to your custom deep dive. We are unpacking what has arguably been one of the most chaotic, well, probably the most pivotal stretch in recent artificial intelligence history.
Yeah, chaotic is definitely the word for it. It really is a lot to process for just a single week.
I mean, in just a matter of days, the entire landscape completely shifted. We're talking about really high-stakes military standoffs involving the Pentagon, executive orders from the president, top AI firms drawing these very stark lines in the sand.
Right.
And on top of that, we saw sweeping consumer boycotts, infrastructure literally buckling under sudden popularity, and then the quiet but highly impactful launch of powerful new image generation models.
Exactly. And I think I want to clarify our mission right out of the gate as we go through your materials here.
Yeah.
Because this isn't just a standard tech update.
No, not at all.
We aren't just going to read out benchmark scores to you. What we're really looking at is a masterclass in how geopolitical decisions, consumer sentiment, and enterprise vulnerabilities are all just colliding at once.
Yeah, colliding is a great way to put it.
By the end of our discussion today, you're going to have a really clear framework for understanding why choosing an AI tool for your workflow or your business is fundamentally an exercise in risk management, corporate philosophy, and infrastructure resilience.
Right. It's not just about which model writes better code anymore. So let's start right at the center of the geopolitical storm. The catalyst for all of this week's events was a major contract dispute between Anthropic, the company behind the Claude models, and the U.S. Pentagon.
Right, and we should note Anthropic already had a footprint in the defense space.
They did, yeah. They were actually the first frontier AI company to be deployed on classified military networks. They were specifically working with the national laboratories on custom models. But when it came time to negotiate a new, much broader contract, Anthropic established two really firm red lines.
And those were pretty non-negotiable for them.
Exactly. They stipulated that their technology could not be used for mass domestic surveillance of Americans, and it could not be integrated into fully autonomous weapons systems.
Which sounds reasonable to a lot of people, but the response from the Department of Defense was swift.
Very swift.
Yeah, the Pentagon operates on a standard framework that demands an all lawful purposes clause from its vendors. Essentially, the military wants the flexibility to use a contracted technology for any legally permissible operation without the vendor dictating specific use cases after the fact.
Right, they don't have to ask permission every time they deploy it.
Exactly. So when Anthropic refused to yield on their red lines, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth just canceled their $200 million contract.
$200 million, just like that.
It's just gone. But the Pentagon actually went a step further, officially designating Anthropic a supply chain risk to national security.
And that specific designation is what sent such a massive shockwave through the industry, isn't it?
Absolutely it is. To put that in perspective for you, the supply chain risk label is typically deployed against foreign adversaries or state-sponsored telecom entities like Huawei, where there is this underlying assumption of espionage or sabotage.
Right, you expect that label for international rivals, not an American startup.
Exactly. Applying that label to a domestic American technology company over a commercial contract dispute regarding usage guardrails that is an unprecedented escalation. It effectively signals that any contractor, any supplier or partner doing business with the U.S. military is now restricted from integrating Anthropic's models.
Wow.
Yeah, that branches out to major defense contractors, consulting firms, and potentially even the cloud providers hosting Anthropic's infrastructure.
Which is huge. And the political fallout escalated really quickly from there. Just impartially reporting on the politics of this following a directive from President Donald Trump, who publicly criticized Anthropic's leadership and referred to them as, quote, left-wing nut jobs. Federal agencies across the board halted their use of the company's tools.
Yeah, we saw immediate phase-outs initiated by the State Department, the Treasury, Health and Human Services. It was a sweep.
And legal scholars and industry analysts in your sources are actively debating the precedent this sets. They're specifically questioning whether a disagreement over ethical deployment can legally categorize a domestic firm as a national security threat.
It's a massive legal gray area right now.
It really is. But the vacuum created by that canceled $200 million contract, it didn't stay empty for long, did it?
No, not at all. It was filled almost immediately. Within hours of Anthropic being blacklisted, OpenAI stepped in and signed the exact deal that had just been rejected. They formally accepted the Pentagon's all lawful purposes framework.
Hours later. That is wild. And the internal memos from OpenAI provide some vital context on how they justified this move. Their CEO, Sam Altman, communicated that they are relying on what he called architectural controls rather than rigid contractual language to prevent the technology from being misused.
Right, the architectural controls argument.
Yeah, they laid out a strategy involving cloud-only deployment, a proprietary safety stack that the military agreed not to override, and a requirement for cleared OpenAI engineers to be embedded on-site.
To conceptualize how these architectural controls function, imagine a highly secure bank vault.
Okay.
The bank doesn't necessarily dictate what the client puts inside the safe deposit box, but the bank controls the physical locks, the alarm systems, the structural integrity of the room. OpenAI's argument is that these technical and operational guardrails provide enough oversight to ensure the models aren't used for domestic surveillance or autonomous lethality, even if those specific prohibitions aren't actually inked into the contract.
They believe the technical architecture just superseded the need for contractual red lines.
Exactly.
That philosophy, however, faced immediate and severe pushback from within the industry. An open letter circulated rapidly, signed by over 875 employees across both Google and OpenAI, publicly backing Anthropic's original stance.
Yeah, that was a huge moment of industry solidarity.
It was. The employees voiced concerns about the lack of human oversight in autonomous lethal operations and the potential for government pressure to erode domestic privacy.
And the internal and public pressure just reached a boiling point, ultimately forcing OpenAI to reverse course. Sam Altman addressed his employees, and he actually acknowledged that the agreement appeared opportunistic and sloppy.
Opportunistic and sloppy. Those were his exact words.
Yep, and he committed to revising the contract with the Department of Defense to explicitly include the very red lines. Anthropic had initially demanded a clear ban on domestic mass surveillance and a prohibition on using the models to direct autonomous weapons systems.
Which is an incredible sequence of events, and it completely altered the market landscape on the consumer side, too. While thousands of employees were signing that open letter, hundreds of thousands of users were altering their subscriptions.
Oh yeah, the consumer backlash was massive.
A viral campaign called Quit GPT took hold online, resulting in 700,000 users pledging to cancel their OpenAI accounts. And Anthropic made a highly strategic move in response to this by making their cross-chat memory feature entirely free.
Such a smart play.
Brilliant. This allowed users migrating away from ChatGPT to export their personalized data and seamlessly port their entire chat histories over to Claude.
It is a textbook example of how quickly geopolitical positioning can translate directly into consumer market share. Anthropic provided a frictionless off-ramp for dissatisfied users exactly when sentiment was shifting against OpenAI.
Right.
However, capturing that market share overnight comes with some pretty severe infrastructural consequences.
Definitely. And the numbers from the usage reports highlight exactly that strain. Claude's daily signups quadrupled. Their free active user base jumped by more than 60% in a matter of days, pushing the app to #1 on the US App Store.
Which sounds like a dream scenario for a startup.
Until the servers melt down.
Exactly. That surge completely overwhelmed Anthropic's authentication infrastructure. They suffered a 3-hour worldwide outage, taking their consumer services, mobile apps, and enterprise developer tools entirely offline.
3 hours where nobody could get any work done.
Right. Which brings us to the core enterprise lesson for you, the listener, particularly if you are managing operations or relying on these tools to run a business. This specific chain of events fundamentally rewrites the definition of vendor risk.
How so?
Well, first, consider compliance and exposure. If the AI provider powering your backend signs a loosely defined government contract, does that expose your organization to secondary regulatory risks? Like if your company operates under stringent data privacy frameworks like GDPR, your legal team now have to evaluate whether your provider's military engagements compromise your own compliance posture.
That is a really tough spot for an IT department to be in. And there is also the internal risk of shadow AI.
Oh, absolutely.
The workforce is highly attuned to these viral campaigns. If 700,000 people are pledging to switch tools, your own developers and analysts are likely migrating their informal workflows from one platform to another, entirely outside the purview of your IT department.
Exactly. You have company data suddenly floating into a new ecosystem without any vetting. And that flows directly into a critical concept highlighted in your research stack, agentic amnesia.
Agentic amnesia. Let's really break that down.
Let's say your organization relies entirely on one AI provider. Your engineering teams have spent 6 months building out complex agentic workflows. We're talking custom prompts, specialized API calls, and systems that automatically draft reports or manage inventory based on your proprietary data.
So you've heavily invested in making this tool smart for your specific business?
Exactly. You have essentially loaded your organizational intelligence into that specific model's ecosystem.
And if that provider experiences a massive outage because of a sudden consumer surge like Anthropic just did, or if they are abruptly banned from federal network.
Your workflow halts. You lose that embedded intelligence instantly. Unlike traditional software infrastructure where you can just restore a database from a backup, you cannot easily copy and paste a complex agentic workflow built for Claude and expect it to run perfectly on ChatGPT.
Right, because the underlying reasoning models and API structures are entirely different.
Precisely. The takeaway for your own architecture is that you must build for model portability. Relying on a single provider whose uptime and availability are vulnerable to geopolitical disputes and viral consumer trends is a single point of failure you just can no longer afford.
That is a huge takeaway. But while all of this corporate and political maneuvering was happening, the technology itself continued to advance. Let's look at the major model updates that shipped amidst all this chaos.
Because the tech doesn't sleep.
It really doesn't. OpenAI released GPT 5.3 Instant, and they are officially referring to this as the more accurate, less cringe update.
The naming convention is very deliberate there. This release is less about a massive leap in raw computational reasoning and more about refining tone and usability.
Right.
A consistent friction point for users was that previous iterations were overly cautious, often appending lengthy safety disclaimers to perfectly benign requests. GPT 5.3 Instant strips away those unnecessary refusals. If a prompt is safe, the model simply executes it without the preachy preamble.
Less cringe, I get it. And the benchmark data supports that refinement too. The update yielded a significant drop in hallucination rates. OpenAI reported a 26.8% decrease in hallucinations for web-based tasks and a 19.7% decrease when the model relies purely on its internal knowledge base.
Those are solid improvements for reliability.
Yeah, and they plan to make this the new default, retiring the 5.2 model by June. But the text models weren't the only ones evolving this week. We also have a major showdown in the visual AI space between Google's Nano Banana 2, which is their internal designation for Gemini 3.1 Flash Image, and ByteDance's new Seedream 5.0 Lite.
I love the internal code names. But seriously, this represents a structural shift in how visual AI operates. Unlike older diffusion models that essentially start with a field of static noise and gradually refine it into an image pixel by pixel based on your prompt, both Nano Banana 2 and Seedream 5.0 Lite utilize multi-step chain-of-thought reasoning before they generate anything.
So they are actually thinking about the image before they draw it?
Exactly. They map out the spatial logic, assess the relationships between objects, and even perform real-time web searches to verify details before they begin rendering.
That is a massive leap. The comparative testing in your sources outlines some really clear trade-offs depending on your use case, though. Let's examine Google's Nano Banana 2 first.
Sure.
Its primary advantage is deep integration into the Google ecosystem, including Workspace and Lens. It is incredibly fast, but its absolute standout feature is the ability to render perfect text. If you need a graphic with a complex sentence, it handles the spelling, the kerning, the typography just flawlessly.
Which has always been a struggle for AI image generators.
Always. But the downside here is the cost.
Yeah, it is priced at a premium for the market. Nano Banana 2 charges $60 per million output tokens. To understand how tokens apply to images, these models break a generated image down into a grid of tiny patches, and each patch consumes tokens.
Got it.
So for a high-resolution 4K image, that math translates to roughly 15 cents per generation. Additionally, Google enforces strict safety guardrails. If you attempt to upload a photograph of a real person to alter their clothing or background, the model will flatly refuse to process the request to prevent deepfake generation.
Which makes sense from a safety perspective, but can be limiting for legitimate workflows. Now, in contrast, ByteDance's Seedream 5.0 Lite takes a completely different approach. The pricing is a flat rate of just 3.5 cents per image, regardless of the output resolution.
That is incredibly cheap.
Very cheap. And it allows for local deployment, which is a total non-starter for Google. But most notably, its policy allows for the editing and manipulation of real photographs.
And that permissive policy is exactly what makes Seedream highly attractive for professional design workflows.
Right.
The sources detailed a really rigorous test involving a photograph of a couple at a shopping center. The objective was to modify their outfits across 5 sequential iterations while maintaining their facial features and identities.
A very standard advertising use case.
Exactly. When Nano Banana 2 was forced to approximate the task, since it refuses direct edits of real people, it gradually replaced the subjects entirely, altering their ages and facial structures across the iterations. It effectively recast the actors.
Which ruins the consistency.
Right. But Seedream 5.0 Lite maintained the exact core identity, the physical pose, and the spatial proximity of the couple through all 5 edits. For an advertising campaign requiring a consistent subject across various environments, Seedream offers a distinct operational advantage.
However, the benchmark testing identified a shared vulnerability in both models during extended use.
Yes, and this is a crucial operational detail for you to keep in mind. Both models suffer from what they are calling a consistency bug during prolonged API sessions.
How does that happen?
Well, when you ask the model to perform sequential generation after generation in a single continuous chain, its reasoning capabilities begin to degrade. Seedream will start producing blurry or distorted faces, and Nano Banana 2 will lose the character's core identity entirely.
It just gets tired.
Basically, yeah. The architecture essentially throttles its own compute power the longer a continuous session runs.
Yeah.
So the practical solution here is to batch your requests. Ask the model to execute multiple edits in a single comprehensive prompt rather than chaining together dozens of consecutive minor adjustments.
That is a great pro tip. Looking at this entire stack of sources, the overarching narrative is just so clear. Artificial intelligence is no longer operating in an isolated technological bubble where the only metrics that matter are latency and compute power.
Not at all.
It is deeply and messily entangled in defense politics, mobilized consumer activism, and infrastructure that can just fracture under the weight of sudden market shifts.
And the core lesson to synthesize for your own strategic planning is that when you integrate an AI tool, you are no longer simply licensing an algorithm. You are buying into a comprehensive ecosystem.
That's the real takeaway here.
You are adopting that provider's ethical framework, their physical server capacity, and their geopolitical standing. Every one of those factors now directly impacts the security and the uptime of your own operations.
It fundamentally changes the calculus for software procurement and system architecture. I'll pass it back to you for a final thought before we wrap up today.
Thanks. Yeah, it raises a lingering question that extends way beyond the events of this past week. Think about it. If today's AI models are rapidly becoming the localized infrastructure for modern business, and we've just seen that a single government contract dispute or a viral consumer boycott can take them offline or alter their functionality overnight.
Yeah.
What happens when we inevitably integrate these exact same foundational models into real-time life or death systems?
Oh.
When hospital triage networks or municipal air traffic control systems rely on this infrastructure, switching providers will take years, not minutes. In that scenario, who truly controls the off switch?
That is a vital question to keep in mind as this technology scales into those spaces. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. Keep examining the tools you rely on, keep questioning the ecosystems behind them, and join us next time as we unpack another stack of sources to help you navigate what comes next.